I think if you look at high throughput blockchains, their end outcome from a technical infrastructure elegance perspective is to have a decentralized network perform as good as a centralized exchange, right? And so that's always what we're competing with from a user experience perspective, because if something can happen easier in Web 2, why would they use Web 3? And that's what we are all trying to make sure that we can bridge the gap on. But specifically within trading, that just means...
Today's guest is Ash Pampati, the head of ecosystem at Aptos. Aptos is a layer 1 blockchain and has seen lots of growth lately in its ecosystem between its Move Maker initiative with the Move AI hackathon, network updates like Shardines, and of course, payment solutions like Pact Protocol, and the recently deployed USDE from Athena Labs. This episode is the 4th quarterly webinar series that we do with Aptos. I had Avery Ching, the co-founder and CEO, on back in January, and I'm excited to talk to Ash. Ash, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. To start off, I always like asking my guests, how did you even get into this space?
I was onboarded onto NFTs while I was working at Google. And specifically YouTube. And my whole job at YouTube was to figure out how to evolve the creator economy for musicians. And as a user, I found this burgeoning creator economy happening in Web3. And so I spent about a year or so trying to convince YouTube and Google, the powers that be, to get into the space, to no avail, unfortunately, at the time. And just decided that I'll be a dinosaur by the time I'm 40 if I don't pursue this full time.
Right.
And that's how it happened.
So Google to Aptos.
Google to a company called Metaplex, which was spun out of Solana Labs, and then Metaplex to Aptos.
Okay, so Solana to Aptos.
Yeah.
How's the transition?
It's great. We, I think the lucky thing of my journey has been I got to learn firsthand of what a very high functioning, ambitious ecosystem looks like with Solana, that I think only high throughput, high performance, and convicted founders can really imagine. And so here at Aptos, we have all the same ingredients, but we have a lot of room to grow and catch up. So I think it's been great.
Yeah. And you just joined like a month ago?
Yeah. So I joined at Q4 of 2024
a few months
at
ago.
the end of it.
Yeah.
And then I stepped into this new role at the beginning of the year as head of ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does ecosystem mean to you?
To me, pretty simply, it means all of your stakeholders with your project, whether it be investors, your community, your users, your developers, your founders, your partners, are all kind of coordinated around a singular mission, which is to grow the network, but also decentralize it. And I think decentralization is critically important, not just from a technical perspective. Obviously, we're a high throughput, high performance blockchain that is decentralized, but from a mindshare and business perspective as well. I always say that, whatever, let's say in a year, 18 months, if I'm the only one who says I'm the head of ecosystem at Aptos, I've failed. I think we want multiple heads of ecosystems on the Aptos network, multiple foundations, growing the pie and onboarding developers.
And you're saying heads of ecosystems like community members or people who are heads of ecosystems for like specific sectors on top of Aptos?
I think each project, right? Depending on whatever project is launched on Aptos, they launch a token, they have a foundation. Now their job is to grow their ecosystem. And so that's kind of what I mean. But community, I think of, we have a really strong and dedicated community. I think of them as like evangelists and how to tell the story. Marketing in Web3 has always been kind of this red herring in many ways. And I think it all starts with kind of bottoms up community and how narratives are built.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I went to Aptos Experience in Seoul back in September, and the community was very vibrant, very engaged, and it's very specific to the blockchain.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say if you put me in a room for a different blockchain, I would not think that that was Aptos's community.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I think that's a great outcome.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. There we go.
And
job's done.
Well, I don't know about that. Not for me, at least. Maybe for them. But it's like if they're able to articulate better than you the benefits of the chain, why they found it, why it's interesting for them to spend 9 to 5 or 5 to 9 on it, that's a good community, and I think we have a lot of those people.
What do you want to accomplish now that you're in this role?
Pretty simple. I think at the top level, we want to see unicorn businesses and successful tokens on chain. I think in terms of how I look at, metrics in terms of seeing if I've been successful beyond that is economic value being transferred on chain? Are developers able to quit their jobs and work fully on Aptos projects, either being placed in different projects or starting their own company? And are the businesses earning real revenue? Or are they raising from institutional founders who have a very long lens? That's kind of how I'm going to be evaluating my performance over the year and even monthly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Economic value. What does that look like to you for Aptos? Like, what are specific metrics or areas of activity that you're really monitoring then?
Yeah. So I think if you look at high throughput blockchains, their end outcome from a technical infrastructure elegance perspective is to have a decentralized network perform as good as a centralized exchange, right? And so that's always what we're competing with from a user experience perspective, because if something can happen easier in Web 2, why would they use Web 3? And that's what we are all trying to make sure that we can bridge the gap on. But specifically within trading, that just means assets, whether they're RWAs, stables, cryptocurrencies, user-generated assets like meme coins, NFTs, AI tokens, those all can find a user. And that's kind of what I mean. It's just basically how is money moving across chain? The second piece is payments, obviously. I think we've still yet seen breakthrough payments use cases, which you would think,
agreed.
why aren't we there yet? Right? Because it makes so much sense. But I think a lot of the hard work is just now getting completed, right? In terms of making our chain, but other chains ready for the billion users who want to use this. And for us, going back to our origins with Libra at Meta, the blockchain that is Aptos was made to power money movement across their super app economy, right? Move payments from WhatsApp to Instagram cross borders, right? So that's always been in the DNA. And just last week or the last month, we've now integrated all three of the biggest stables in USDC, USDT, and USDE. So the hard work, the infrastructure work, and the integration work is just now getting complete. And, we'll have availability across primary exchanges for all of those things. So it makes it easy for users to access those stables. And now it's about developers and builders building new use cases on top of that.
Yeah. On the stablecoin front, the stablecoin market cap on Aptos also hit an all-time high recently. I think it's fair to say it's probably driven by the integration of these three massive stablecoins. But what do you think it really means long-term for the ecosystem? And how do you see other ways for stablecoins to be kind of tapped into and expanded upon? Yeah,
I think at a macro level, it shows trust in the technology and security of Aptos that these three firms would integrate with Aptos. And in many ways, by comparison, one of the first chains beyond the big ones that they're integrated with, right? So I think from a macro perspective, it shows deep trust in the long view technical capabilities of Aptos. Stables play many roles, right? They play significant roles in DeFi. It's kind of the backbone of that, right? And also in different payments use cases. Like if you think about, you could do 200,000 cross-border payments under $1 now on Aptos. So
that's pretty good. I was thinking about it.
I don't even know what the math is, 0.00 something. But what does that mean, right? That means that if you are, let's say, a rickshaw driver in Bombay and you need a microloan to get your rickshaw, you can do that now, right? And you can get it from someone who's not even in your country. And I think that kind of stuff is just so incredible to think about, because that is true democratization that technology can only bring and Web3 can only bring, opening up financial markets for everyone. And so I think that's kind of, from my perspective, what I'm excited to see, and you mentioned Pact as kind of one of the new partners that have recently partnered with us. Kind of that microloans, micropayments, how are we opening up credit lines for people who never would have had it before? And what can they do? Like, how could they contribute back to their economy in that way? Is really a huge idea.
Yeah. On the front of the Pact protocol integration, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like what it really means for both users and then also like the growth on the stablecoin side or even the DeFi side. Like, where do you see the most opportunity for that maybe in the near term?
I think for Pact, I think there's a tons of opportunity there, and I want to let that team talk about their full roadmaps.
I'll bring them on.
You should. They're an incredible team. Yeah. But I think for them, it's opening up credit to markets that never had it. That's like a big enough job and a crazy job, right? That's a $1 trillion market. So I hope like that's kind of where they spend the most time for all of us. But, you know, when we met with the team, they were like, this is what we're trying to do. And we were like, dude, that's like deeply ambitious and incredible. How can we be a part of it? So, yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. On the DeFi front, what do you think Aptos is getting right today? Whether it's people building on top of it, the internal team, the developments?
Yeah, I think DeFi, you know, it's one of those things that's kind of a loaded term, but you can kind of say it's had product market fit for multiple cycles now. And the question comes down to, you know, basic use cases like borrow, lend. Are you making it easy enough for my brother who's a doctor in Cincinnati who doesn't touch crypto to use? Right?
I don't know if it is easy enough yet.
It's not. But borrow, lend is an easy concept. Right? So
that is true.
So it's still kind of one of those areas where we're like, hey, listen, we were built with the starting point of being very user-friendly, right? Abstracting away some of the complexity and friction Web3 causes, but still maintaining some core tenets around self-custody and decentralization. Like, we are built that way. Everything from our blockchain to our dev tooling. So how can we make DeFi a little bit more approachable, at least on these simplistic use cases that we know everyone uses? I think we have a lot of room with our ecosystem to co-build and grow in that way. I think in terms of what we're doing well, I think for us, it's really a go forward perspective on what we care about. I think we are going to see a lot of great projects come on board. But also in very specific areas where competition is quite necessary. So things like AMMs and decentralized exchanges, we're really excited about seeing more competition. And there's tons of new innovation that could be done there. And it's just waiting for the right builder or founder to come across and really knock those out of the park. Yeah.
No, I agree with that. And I think the joke you made about your brother, maybe it wasn't even a joke. It's just the reality where some people can't. Maybe it's not that they can't access it, they don't know how to access it, right?
Yeah.
So from your perspective, head of ecosystem, how do you look at engaging anyone from like traditional institutional investors to the on-chain everyday degen to the average consumer out there that's not in crypto? Remember trying to move your assets between chains, watching the minutes tick by, wondering if your transaction would make it? Yeah, we've all been there. But here's the thing. While other bridges feel like taking the scenic route, Across is your express lane. Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, boom, boom, boom. Your assets move between them faster than you could say cross-chain. Across isn't just another bridge. When Uniswap needed the fastest, most reliable way to move assets cross-chain, they chose Across. Now, millions of Uniswap users are swapping between chains without even thinking about it, because that's how it should be. Whether you're moving assets yourself or building the next big thing in crypto, Across makes cross-chain feel like the same chain. No more scenic routes, no more complexity, just 2-second transfers between chains. Ready to join the express lane? Head to across.to and experience what bridging should have been all along.
I think personally, I'm very excited about the core Web3 user because I think it was Chris Dixon's book that I read before I joined. But, you know, like a Web3 user is probably, a core Web3 user is probably like 10,000 times more valuable than just a Web2 user in terms of their capacity for pain as a user.
That is so true.
Right?
Yeah.
The amount of hurdles they will jump over to
Yeah.
do a simple action, the amount of risk they take.
Right.
And I don't mean trading. I mean like putting money in a wallet that could be compromised
Yeah.
and then a hot wallet.
And
a
also
cold,
trading.
and of
Yeah,
course, like, doing crazy
Right.
leverage and things.
Yeah.
I mean, but so, and then also like the amount of economic value they're accounted for on chain, right? So for me, it is imperative to win those users.
Mhm.
And I, as like a crypto full-timer maxi person, know that group is going to grow and grow and grow if you make user experience and interesting new product innovation available at a high frequency.
Mhm.
But I think you have to win those people. You win those people, it's easy to justify the people who are a little bit more passive to lean in because they see activity, right? And hopefully you learn and you get such a high signal from these people that are willing to give it on the core Web3 side that your product improves like at a crazy scale.
Right.
Like that's the other thing, like a Web3 user, it's so fascinating. They are going to be your power user one day, but because everything's open source software, they could be your competitor tomorrow. Like,
That's true.
you know, they could say, hey, I know how to do this. I'm going to fork the code, hire a couple of devs, and now I have another protocol and I'm doing this, right? And so they're high signal people. And so if you treat them right and you really deliver value for them, they're going to help you make your product like 10x, 20x better.
Mhm.
And it needs to get 10 to 20x better before you try to onboard a passive user or a Web2 user who doesn't have the time. They're not going to go through the pain for that. So I think that's the order of priority. In terms of institutions, I think, kudos to the team that was here even before I was at the company. They really built a lot of trust with the institutions and enterprise partners to say, hey, listen, we're a challenger brand, a challenger network. Talk to our tech team, look at our security practices, like, let's get you on board. And that has worked great. And I think now is the time to kind of just say, hey, listen, let's grow those businesses, let's grow those partnerships, but let's focus on these everyday Web3 users and hopefully to onboard the Web2 users that we know are going to stand at the end of the line.
So focus is Web3 users first.
For me,
For you.
But I will say, I think the whole company, that's where their focus is as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because once you kind of attract the audience within the Web3 ecosystem, it could kind of snowball effect into something a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And then like average DGen user XYZ then tells family friend about it who's not in crypto at all, and then suddenly they're the one onboarding on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly correct. Like the network effects of onboarding a Web3 user is way higher. I mean, look at crypto Twitter. Like every user is almost tweets. Like it's like probably, I don't know what the ratio is, but like
a lot of them are tweeting. Yeah.
Even if it's 20%, what a crazy conversion rate, right? Like
that's true. Yeah.
I use YouTube. I don't tweet about YouTube. You know what I mean? Like
you could, but you don't.
But it's like, who is this guy tweeting about videos he's watched on YouTube?
Yeah.
Who cares? But you know what I mean? So it's like, if you get that user, you almost have this insane distribution.
Yeah.
Because they're going to tell everyone about it on Twitter and exactly like you say, their family at Thanksgiving. And so I think it's just a highly valuable and it's a very competitive space to win those users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last major question on the DeFi front. Are there any specific use cases that you would like to see be developed on top of Aptos that hasn't really been like dove into yet?
Yeah, for Aptos specifically, it definitely has been dove into or dived into in other ecosystems.
I don't think I said that right.
No, I think you said it fine. I said
it's okay.
it wrong.
I'm the host.
Yeah. I messed up. But the way I look at it is we want an ecosystem on the DeFi and trading front that basically allows new tokens to self-launch. And, I'm not going to take an opinion on a meme coin versus utility coin, but anyone who has an idea, they have a way to self-launch it in a fair way. Those tokens can get good price discovery on the AMM and decentralized exchange side. And then, we'd really love to see great perps dexes on Aptos, which don't exist yet. Obviously with the success of Hyperliquid, everyone's kind of thinking that. But if you just think about what it would have been like to have that type of product experience on a blockchain like Aptos, the ideas get really interesting. And, once you do that, ecosystems can start to be built upon like other platforms, right? Because there's liquidity and things like that. So those are kind of the areas that I'm specifically interested in. So fair token launches, great price discovery on dexes, and like perps dexes that are just like crazy with Aptos's performance.
That makes sense. Yeah. Before we started recording, we were talking about the principles for growth. Something that's important to you, and I believe conversations you were having internally. Can you kind of expand on that for the listeners?
Yeah. So I think I come from a growth background. Like that was my first job at Spotify. And my goal at Spotify when it launched in the US was very mission driven, which was stop piracy, get people to pay for music again. And my thought process was essentially like, look, I'm just one person. The US is rampant with piracy. We're a challenger brand. Like, where can I spend my time? And I decided to spend my time on finding the most contrarian user group and convincing them to buy the product and use it.
What's the most contrarian user group then?
It was college kids in the middle of the country.
I could believe that.
They were the ones who were pirating music in their dorms.
Yeah. LimeWire, SoundCloud, all that stuff.
There you go. You were one of them, maybe. Where'd you go to school?
I went to UNC Chapel Hill.
There you go. You were one of them.
I was a LimeWire user back when I was like a kid.
Yeah.
I would get like the wrong mixtape.
Of course.
I'd be like, oh, this is Lil Wayne's new song. And then it would be some random person rapping. And I'm like, let me try again. You know?
You were like, this took 7 hours, but I got another 7 hours.
Yeah. It's going to like completely bug my computer. But I also have Spotify. So you converted me.
So that was my job. I basically looked at the data and I said, where are people under indexing from an IP address perspective on converting to Spotify? And it was the 50 like main campuses in the middle of the country. And I said, I need to go penetrate that market. And so I think about growth from a perspective of just how I started of how do you convince your most contrarian user that you're great? Now that sometimes goes against people's good teachings in the sense that they say, hey, find efficient users, like find people who'll just sign up and then like get them in the funnel.
Like the easier road.
Yeah, but I believe that what you should do, and going back to targeting the Web3 user, which is competitive, but doing that first, is that your first users, they should be valuable and you should spend as much money as possible to get them. Because they're going to give you great signal and they're going to make your product and therefore make your products better. And if you do both of those things, they're going to drive tremendous value for your company. So that's my growth principle. And so for me, like coming into Aptos, I think about it the same way, which is how can we have an ecosystem of founders that have great DeFi products, even though DeFi is everywhere. Like
it is like the biggest use case across all blockchains. It's
the biggest use case and ETH is the king, right? And it's like, let's go after that. You know what I mean? Let's just see. Because if we go after that, we're going to train ourselves to be very sharp to go after anything else. When it comes to things beyond that or sectors beyond that, I think about consumer a lot. And, for us or for me, the way I look at it is in Web3, people talk a lot about Web 2.5 when it comes to consumer. Especially if it's outside of the DeFi trading space, they're like, what else, right? And personally, my perspective is, I want to go after the Web3 user. I don't want any of the experience to be the Web3 core experience to be abstracted from the user. I want to know they're interacting with the blockchain and I want them to find that enjoyable, right? To do their daily things. And therefore, I want to find products and founders who can also do that. Right. And so that's kind of like my principles to growth to this thing is like, let's just, I know the most valuable user is going to be the hardest to get, but if we can train ourselves to get them, it's going to make us all better. So
is the most valuable user people already in crypto, but they're like dedicated to another chain and you're trying to tell them, hey, come over here? I think a principle of marketing, sometimes people think it's about creating new demand, but it's actually about diverting existing demand first. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, honestly. It just is. I would love to tell a flowery story about, let's, but if you can't convert existing demand, you're not going to create new demand. So I'm not going and vampire attacking other ecosystems. That's not my intention, but it usually doesn't pan out well on crypto Twitter either. It doesn't, but
sometimes you'll get a good dunk or two.
Hey.
But it's about saying, hey, we have something pretty amazing to offer from a technological standpoint. I'm not doing my job if I don't tell you about it. That's kind of how I see it. So, yeah.
So were you at ETH Denver?
I was, and some of the team was. I was at Consensus
people.
in Hong Kong before that. And
okay. How was Consensus?
It was great. It was my first Consensus in Hong Kong. Obviously, you know, the Asian market and specifically Hong Kong brings a very unique dimension of like the industry together. And so it was really great to kind of like meet a lot of the folks there and just learn about the business, you know, like most of the top exchanges are from China, you know, and they're amazing at it. And just even like understanding the levels of which they operate their business and thinking about, okay, what happens when the regulatory environment opens up in the United States? Like, what does competition look like for the incumbents in the US, right? Or, you know, the East Asian companies going to expand to the US? What does that look like? Or will there be new companies that take the East Asian model and start to like build up in the US and like give Coinbase competition? So for me, that's kind of the thing that rattled in my head the most from that. But yeah, it was great.
Yeah. On the regional side, I know Aptos is opening or did open an office in Hong Kong and is also kind of expanding in that Chinese market. Few questions here.
Yeah.
Regional differences. How do you look at that from an ecosystem perspective? Because I can't imagine you approach, let's say, the Asian market and European market and American market and African market all the same.
Yeah.
Right? We all like certain things and there's cultural differences and that plays into the way you talk to them, right? Do you hate your PR firm? Then listen up because this ad is for you. This episode is sponsored by 72B, a boutique public affairs firm founded by a former Coinbase comms manager. If you're sick of your toxic relationship with your public relations firm, break up with your agency and get better issue positioning, executive profile building, and more with 72B. Check them out at 72b.io.
Completely. I mean, there's the way in which you talk to them, but to your earlier point, there's a way in which you prioritize the market. And I think about it as a funnel. So for us or any foundation, they have a grants arm, right? What's the purpose of a grants arm? Well, it's to accelerate development in key areas that make the ecosystem better. But for us, you know, part of the job is to bring vigor around how we think about the graduation of someone from a hackathon to getting a grant, to building an MVP, to hiring a team to ship it, to getting their first dollar, to launching their token or raising a round.
To creating something bigger than just like an idea.
Exactly. So for me, it's kind of like, we need to be good at connecting everyone through that journey. And some markets are over-indexed at different parts of the funnel, right? So India, for example, it's a very talent-rich market, but there's low financial capital to invest in crypto in the sense. So what you find is a lot of great builders come from India, but they move to Dubai or they move to Singapore to then take that next step of like, I'm hiring a team. There's more like community here in crypto. There's more financial capital here. I can network better. So then it's like, okay, well, Dubai is like where we help founders be founders, right? We can connect them with investors. We can show up there in a very different way than we may typically show up in India, although I think that's changing. And then, you know, let's say, for example, they're trying to raise a round from some like Western institutions. You know, we'd bring them to New York and we'd show up in a different way, right? Like we'd kind of say, let's do like investor days. Let's kind of show up that way. So it just really depends on the market and where it falls into terms of that funnel. So India, Vietnam, hugely talent rich developers who are looking for that next step. They can build, they're looking to find their founder or their co-founder or maybe raise some money. You know, when I think about, you know, Hong Kong and China, as well as the US and Canada, I think about everything across the board, right? There's developers, but then they quickly become into founders and then they quickly become into like companies. And so for us, we need a much more end-to-end kind of like relationship there. So for example, in the US, we have Palo Alto and New York. So we're covered in the two poles of innovation, although you could argue that we should be in Miami and Chicago as well.
Would be nice.
Would be
Miami's
nice.
warm.
It's be warm. I could go there for the summer or the winters.
The winter, yeah.
But Canada, BC and Waterloo are like amazing
Hubs for that.
Hubs for talent. So it's kind of like, how do we show up there and double down? And then specifically with MoveMaker, which we just launched as essentially an incubator and accelerator, but an extension of our foundation in many ways, to go and find those founders to build those next generation products. Because we believe China is like equally, if not more at this stage, important.
Yeah. On the front of accelerators, there's Anka. There was the Exponential Week. I don't know if that's an accelerator. I don't think it was. It was like bringing startups.
It was more like an event. Yeah.
And then what you just talked about as well. And then there's also the $200 million ecosystem fund, right? That happened last week. How do you see these moving the needle, like in the long term? I guess it is kind of the evolution of like developer to founder to creating value within the Aptos ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to getting talent and good talent, how do you kind of think about that in your head? It sounds
such a hard job.
Yeah, I was gonna say it seems pretty hard.
And I have no VC background, so I haven't gotten the reps to see. And I'm an operator at heart, but I can recognize it's very hard. I think the way in which you make it less hard is to give a guidepost on what you care about. So for us, we care about DeFi. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We're announcing, we're projected to spend $200 million in that this year. So we care about that. Yeah. We care about these 4 products.
A big chunk of change.
Yeah. But also like, it's one of those things where it's like, you say that number, but then you specify what areas you want to see competition or new innovation in. So that brings a lot of people out who have opinions. And I think that's like probably the first thing you want out of someone or a founder or a builder who wants to be a founder is they have strong opinions. The second area I think for us is like really having boots on the ground in high talent density markets. Boots on the ground in Web3 is everything. Like, it's funny because like we're permissionless networks, we're decentralized, we're trustless environments, but we're like have a huge events industry.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's like, so true.
It's crazy, right? And you could say like, oh, like people wasting their time with it. It's like, no, that's like literally how you build connections in Web3 because you don't know each other, right? And that's the beauty of the technology is you don't need it to know each other for technology to work, but for us all to have a good time as a decentralized community, we want to make sure people in the boat like have the same ideas in a way, right? Or at least are moving towards a singular outcome. And so I think for us, like boots on the ground, this is why some of these accelerators are super important. So Hong Kong, having an always on strategy there where any founder who's basically has an idea, they have a budget for grants. They have a way to like stand them up in terms of from like idea, like a white paper to a product. I think we have this company, Hyperfluid, which is a protocol, DeFi protocol. They went from, we had our accelerator in January where they came to New York, and now they're already like 60 million TVL. So you know what I mean? Yeah. Like they weren't even building the product yet.
Yeah.
And that came through, our MoveMaker accelerator. So this is the type of thing that matters in my opinion, which is like show people what you care about and then see who has the strongest opinions about that. That's probably a pretty good combination. And then have boots on the ground in really, really key priority markets. You can't get away from having boots on the ground.
That 60 million in TVL, what do you think attributed that growth and scale in such a short amount of time?
For them, I mean, it was just, they were just basically, with a protocol, you have to align a bunch of stakeholders. You need LPs, and then you build a product, and then you get users. And so I think they just did a great job at coordination. Like they just knew what they wanted to do. This is the roadmap. This is where we're starting, and we're doing it. We're live. Let's go.
Yeah.
Which is hard for even us to do, but also like really hard for like a smaller company to do. So I think that just conviction to execution is everything.
Based on the conversations you're having with startups or teams in these accelerators or just coming into the office, what do they want and what do they need? Wants and needs are different.
Yeah.
Like I want to be the best DeFi protocol out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like, what do they actually need from you guys?
Look, I think that we're in a volatile market, not just now, but just the crypto industry, right? There's cycles. I think I really value people who decide to spend their time on this industry. I really do. And I don't take that lightly. Like, it means they've quit their job or they're working from 5 to 9 outside of their day job. And so that's number one. I basically treat everyone with deep appreciation because I'm like, that's awesome. What they need is assurance that they'll have runway to like try.
Right.
And so we have a grants program for that. So I think for us, it's like, that is a pretty direct way in which we can enable folks. I think the job for both parties is essentially to make sure that we are staying accountable to each other on whether we're learning together. And I think the job that we can give after that is say, we'll take multiple shots on you because we saw how accountable you were. We saw how committed you are, and things just happen in the industry, right? Maybe there's a new meta that comes along or a black swan event and like, you know, the product doesn't make sense anymore or whatever, or the roadmap was like shuffled around. They just want a shot on goal. And they also want, if they do a good job, to take a few more, right? Because of how volatile our industry can be sometimes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm thinking on the Aptos side for, I guess, growth. What are some strategies that you're going to start implementing or already have been doing to kind of like attract that new talent or that contrarian road of there's users and there's developers, and they might already exist in another ecosystem. But for you, I guess, what's the easiest way to attract them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I focus.
I don't even know if there is an easy way. Sorry.
There's no easy way, but
it's a trick question.
There's simple ways. Simple is not always easy. You know, I kind of focus on developers because I think developers will build the products that attract users.
Okay.
And, you know, crypto developers, ones with talent, are the most sought after resource for any blockchain. Like, where are they spending their time? There's probably in the magnitude of only a few thousand that exist today, right? So you basically do the math. You say, okay, well, most of them are EVM. They're like building an EVM.
Right.
The rest are Solana, right? SVM, and then now Move, which is, you know, the language architecture for Aptos and other Move chains. And so you basically say, okay, well, what part of our job right now is to increase the ceiling for awareness on why Move is a better language and what can it do? And then what secondary part of that job do we quickly need to follow to say, this is why doing it on Aptos is better? Because Move is kind of this canonical thing and a language that multiple chains are using. But Aptos and its architecture has its own value proposition within it. And so I think for us, it needs to be centered, at least now, on why Move is great. And you should have some of our engineers on to like talk about that, because there's a whole depth of knowledge that is good to unearth and that we should tell a better story about. And so I think that's kind of like really key. I think the second thing is, how do like hackathons and like basically having events, you know, we're an events driven business in many ways. And there's always hackathons around there, right? I think, how do you keep the engagement evergreen in between the moments, right? Of how do you keep people continuing to build and trying new stuff between the events? And I think that's the simple yet kind of complex thing to crack that our team is focused on.
How do you do that? Good apps?
I think you mentioned MetaMove as one of the new I would say kind of AI frameworks that we're having and integrating across, not us, but the team behind MetaMove are integrating across the protocols and like getting developers to build. And there's a $250,000 cash prize. Doing things like that, giving people a reason to try new things is kind of key, right? So doing that in a programmatic way is super key. Yeah.
Looking at the broader crypto ecosystem, you've been in the space for
3 years.
3 years,
I'm
bit
a baby.
of time.
I'm a baby.
3 years is long.
Yeah.
It's also short in the broader picture, but it's long to me. I think the overall crypto ecosystem changes for better or for worse. Every cycle, there's new narratives, themes, and then there's also new entrants, right? How do you kind of look at maybe, let's say, the next 6 to 12 months, not from like a speculative or like predicting side of things, but the future of what's possible on Aptos?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that an app like Polymarket was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge success, I thought, and it broke through the sphere of mainstream consciousness in a way I haven't seen before. There's been things that have come close to the sun, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of go down. But in terms of all of the moments lining up and everyone talking about this was kind of like, that we get, like, something has to get there again and beyond. And I don't think anything has come really close to that yet, just personally. I think there's been a lot of new metas, like obviously with meme coins. And when you think about the amount of money and stuff that's made by the protocols from that, and also the distrust in the mainstream consciousness around this stuff, we really, I think, need to go back to saying, like, what is the mainstream consumer killer app that breaks through mainstream consciousness and can sustain for a period of time? So that's kind of what I'm really looking for. And maybe in the payment space, right? Like for us, like, you might see a company rethink, and I'm not saying HR software is like gonna break brains, but create a new, like, Ripple, right? Like through on-chain payments and like payroll. Like, there's things that I think I can see happening on Aptos uniquely based on our architecture. And now that we've done a lot of the work to get ready for that. But yeah, I think we still have a ways to go.
Okay.
Yeah. Not we, and as an industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Aptos included, but maybe Aptos aside, we've talked a lot about ecosystem growth, development, etc. But what do you think, just in general, truly makes a good ecosystem?
Whenever a developer decides they want to build there, they immediately can send a DM to 30 people, or 30 people send a DM to them and ask how they can help. That's it. I think that is the sign of like a healthy ecosystem. You have someone who's decided that they're going to spend their time, which is the most scarce asset that anyone has in the world, on this thing. And they immediately have a community of people who are like, I spend my time on this too. Let me help. Let's get on a call. Let's do this. Right. And it's not just the foundation. It's people who are building on Aptos. I think that's like the sign of a very healthy ecosystem.
Your DM's open?
My DMs are open. Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Sure. I'm here to help, but also there's plenty of ecosystem teams that are here to help, right? Who've done it before, who've built businesses, who can be like, yo, like, I can help you, or like, come work for me, And that's what I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this ends nicely with my last request is if you could leave us with a piece of advice, something that you've carried with you throughout your time in this space.
A piece of advice. I would always say, be opinionated, but hold them loosely, especially in this space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, Ash. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.